I'm not going to go through his whole bio. I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about that, and you saw it in email. But the reason I really thought it would be great to have him come in is he was talking about getting into sort of real estate photography with his business partner and recognizing there was a need for something different, and then restructuring their whole business plan to go in that direction. And it sounds like it's really made, an exponential difference to their business. And just the idea to be able to see that there was this need, that there was something missing in the market, and being able to then, actuate that into happening, I thought was pretty amazing, and hopefully you'll hear a little bit about that today as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brian. We had talked a little bit. If you have questions during the presentation, please, just let them know. We'll try and get a mic over to you so we have it for recording. Again, doesn't matter if you can't hear this at all. This is really just for the recording part. So we'll get a mic to you when you have questions. There'll be time at the end for questions as well. So there we go.
Great, cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Hey guys. As mentioned, please feel free, raise your hand, ask questions along the way. I know I've got I'm mic'd up, but I want to try to keep this informal. I'm going to be throwing a lot at you, and I always like to say, don't try to memorize everything that I'm saying. If there's anything, try to take one thing away. If you can take one thing away and you can apply it tomorrow, then that's absolutely fantastic. I think photography is so incredible, and it obviously kind of has revolutionized the way we kind of process information. Every day we're bombarded by imagery, whether it's on social media or it's on billboards or it's on television. It's always in front of you, and the consumer's eye has gotten a lot more sophisticated than it used to be. So it's kind of important for the professional photographer to kind of rise to the occasion and to meet the sophistication that already exists now in the consumer marketplace. I'm going to be talking about the business of photography, because while photography in itself is a creative art form, if you're going to be a professional, you have to consider the business aspects. You have to consider about how you are going to succeed so that you can grow as an artist. It's kind of a yin-yang nature. So the way I'm going to structure it is I'm going to tell you a little bit about my company. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about tips that I think are extremely helpful, and I wish I had learned before I'd gotten started. So my company is DDreps, and we are a creative agency for the real estate industry. So we're helping agents sell their listings more quickly for higher prices by turning the agents into marketing heroes. We do this by elevating the production value of really photography. That is our bread and butter. But we have a lot more verticals. We have about 6 verticals now, and we're constantly growing. So as when we got started, it was in about 2009, and I wasn't even part of the company. The company was started by Donna Dotan. She got into real estate photography, and it was kind of at the turn of the digital revolution, you should say, with DSLRs. And there was a lot of interesting things that was happening the way that real estate was marketed. Previously, there was no photos, or the photos were taken on their phone, or they were taken just very, very poorly. So here's just a few examples. This isn't from years ago. I literally went on the internet for 5 minutes, and I just picked out a bunch of photos that I think represents what things used to be and obviously still are. So the way that real estate photography was done way back when was very utilitarian. You'd go in, if you were a photographer, you would walk into an apartment, and again, an agent is using these photographs to sell the listing, right? So they need to show the space, show how it looks, which is where the real estate photographer kind of comes in. And in New York City, a photographer would come in, spend about half an hour to 45 minutes in the space, no matter how big it was. They would set up their shot on a tripod. They would take 1 shot per room. They would keep the lights on. They would use a flash. They would just bang, 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 get the information, get out the door, plug it into an HDR program. Does everybody know what HDR is? High dynamic range. So you can have a computer program that takes different bracketed exposures and combines them and creates an AI version of what they feel like that final product should be. It's very, very, it was all the rage for a little bit of time, but a lot of people started to rely on it too heavily, and it looks fake. It doesn't look authentic. So we identified that as a major issue in the industry. The photography itself, it was considered unimportant. Again, it was sometimes done on the phone. It was just basically looked over. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to figure out how we could differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. And it took a long time. We did a lot of pivoting to get where we are today. But really what we do now is we don't consider ourselves real estate photographers. So I have, and I'm going to talk about this too, but we have 7 photographers right now. We're going to bring on 2 more. We have architectural photographers that service the real estate industry. So what does that mean? That means that we spend much more time on a project site, whereas before it was half an hour to 45 minutes. Our base package starts with 2 hours. We focus on compositions. We go at it editorially. We use natural light. But the key element is that we're shooting it like it's going into Architectural Digest. And you do that by having a type of professionalism that just didn't exist in the marketplace before. So here's some examples of what we consider to be shots that really kind of didn't exist at that time that we came in. And it really starts with having a yin and a yang. So yes, we needed to get the wide shot that typically was seen in the real estate photography industry, but we wanted to mix it with an emotional, storytelling, editorial, architectural experience. So what you see is you see storytelling. So we wanted to be able to bring the viewer in. And we do this in a variety of ways. It starts at composition. We use natural light. You can see here. This is a moment, too, which I think is really, really interesting. So we have a wide shot for this, and we mixed it with this little moment, this little detail. Because the people we feel that are buying real estate in New York City are people that read magazines like House Beautiful, Elle Decor, Architectural Digest. So we felt that if we can emotionally hook them in, the agent has a much better shot of getting someone in the door where they can do their job and they can sell the apartment. All of our images, they're clean, they're crisp, they're consistent no matter who is doing the photography. We have a very specific process that all of our photographers filter their photo shoots through, and I'll get into that more later. So just wanted to also give you an example, a side-by-side of so we came in for this project and we reshot it. And so the left is the before and the right is after. And just to quickly point out a few of the things that we found were big, big issues. The first thing is the lights. So you'll see here that on the left side, the lights are on. So what does this do? You can see the yellow tint that's kind of coming off it, and it distorts the natural colors of the space. And on the right side, you can see how the natural colors of the space are able to represent the apartment. And that's very, very important. This feels a little bit dark. Here you have furniture. This hits into that, which hits into that, which hits into that. It's all very, very cluttered here. So we spent about half an hour designing this shot so that we can open up the space, so that we could see through. And we did that just by taking the time to do it, by slowing things down. Here's another look. This is of the same room, but the back area. And so the other photographer had come in. Again, the lights were turned on. A very uninteresting angle, specifically because this table, this dining area, it takes up the entire shot. So from our perspective, it kind of ate up the entire space, and it didn't create an interesting moment. So what we wanted to do is we moved some of the furniture out of the way. We pulled back. We did an architectural, like, straight-on shot, and we were able to create a really beautiful, dynamic moment where you could see yourself spending time in that area, and you can understand the space better. So besides those types of elements that we were bringing to into the fold, another thing that was not being done was that the agent was not really being able to utilize the photography to promote themselves. So in the real estate industry, the real estate agent, they are independent contractors. which means that they are their own business. And so when they were doing photography, what we wanted to promote was the ability for them to kind of market themselves using social media, to be able to take pictures of themselves in the space, doing environmental portraits, so that they could promote their own work and they could build up a following and they could build their business. So we started asking agents to dress up, dress for success, come on the shoot, and then we encouraged them to kind of step into the shot. And we were able to really design a nice fluid way without artificial lights to be able to kind of fit them into these moments and do it relatively quickly. And what you get is very, very interesting looks where you can kind of see through the space, you can see towards outside, and you can do this in a very, very quick fashion. And agents are able to then build their own brand through the actual photo shoot. And so that was also somewhat of a game changer. Our photography team, right now we have 7 photographers. We're about to bring on 2 more. We have 7 retouchers. And the way it works is we have our photographers. They go out and they do the photo shoot. And that's what they do. They don't do any of the retouching. So when they get back, they upload all the images into our server, and our retouchers take over from there. So we make sure to compartmentalize the process, and that way we're actually able to process a lot more photo shoots. All of our team members, whether on the retouching side or if they're on the photography side, they go through a very strict training process so that we can ensure process consistency from shoot to shoot, from photographer to photographer, and from retoucher to retoucher. That process, depending on the person, can take anywhere from a month to 3 or 4 months. It really depends on who we're working with and who we decide to take on. Our camera kit, we want everyone to use a Canon system, the Mark system. When it comes to tripod head, we prefer that they have at least a Manfrotto 410, but we prefer them to have an Arca Swiss D4 geared head because you're doing photography. It's very important to get your lines straight, very architectural. You want to be very, very precise, and you can do that really well with an Arca Swiss D4. With our lenses, we use a 16-35, a 24-70 for detail shots. The 16-35 is a wide lens, so you're able to capture a lot in the space. And this is really, really something that differentiates us from a lot of other people, is we use tilt-shift lenses. So are you guys familiar with what a tilt-shift is? So we use that for the shift feature. We make sure that everyone either has a 24 or a 17, but we prefer that they have both. We want them to have a wireless connection to a tablet, so when they're on the project site, they're able to wirelessly connect and show a live feed to what that composition looks like to either the owner or the agent, so we can have a more of a collaborative environment if the client wants that. Polarizers. So when you're taking a shot, a polarizer is really, really great to be able to remove glare from the floor and from the walls. So we want them to have those as well. And then a remote trigger. We do not bring artificial lights. So we set things up on a tripod and we bracket. So we take really, really bright exposures all the way down to really, really dark exposures. We polarize for the floor, for the wall. And sometimes that means that we're taking 3 or 4 sets. Sometimes that means that we're taking between 30 and 40 shots for one angle. And then we let the retouchers take over and blend it into some sort of very, very beautiful composition. But not having lights means we have a very light footprint, which means we can go in, we can go out, and also it lends to a more authentic look, we feel, when it comes to architecture. It lends to something a little bit more natural. So our process, our photographers, when they get a project, they go on site, they take every relevant angle that they feel is necessary while they're there. Sometimes it's a 2-hour shoot, sometimes it's a 4-hour shoot, sometimes it's an 8-hour shoot. It really depends on how big the space is. After the shoot, the photographers, they come back, they upload all the RAWs into our server through a peer-to-peer transfer. They process the medium exposures, they upload them into a proofing system that then gets sent to clients for selections. The clients then make their selections, they share them with us, and then once they share them with us, it goes into our retouching queue, and that's where our retouchers, they take over. It's very, very quick, it's automated, it's process heavy. The retoucher, they do a wave of post-production on the selections. They submit the project for internal review, and once it's approved, it gets delivered to the client. The whole process from the time that the photo shoot happens to doing selections to delivery can be 2 days, which is ridiculously fast. It's really, really fast for what we're providing. Some general notes about the DDreps. DDreps, as an agency, we only began in 2017. So this is really just the third year of our operation. When we launched, there were only 3 photographers and 2 retouchers. And now our team's grown to about 20 team members over 6 different verticals. Last year, we did around 1,150 projects for the entire year. And this year, we've done 750, right around there to date. So we're growing. 2 weeks ago, we photographed 41 projects totaling around 150 million in real estate value. So now I'm just going to get into a little bit of history about how I got to where we are. And basically, in 2007, I graduated from Binghamton University with a degree in English. I did not have a business background, so I had no idea what I was doing when I got into this business. It was a real process of just throwing it on the wall and seeing if it sticks. I did commercial real estate before I got into this business for 3 years, right at the height of the recession. I realized very quickly that it was not for me. I guess not very quickly if it took 3 years. But what was amazing about my time doing commercial real estate was I was able to create a process for sales. That was what I was doing. I was basically trying to find a building owner who wanted to sell their building and match them up with a buyer. And I had no idea how to do that except by making phone calls. So I basically cold called for 3 years. And what I did was I would build out lists in Excel, and I would follow up. And I would color code each of these the line items, the clients, to determine, if they were hot leads or if they weren't. And I was just persistent. I would follow up all the time. It didn't really lead to anything because, again, it was in the height of the recession, and nobody was really selling. So at a certain point, I'd gotten together with my now wife, Donna Dotan, and she was doing some pretty wild things. She was just starting her career in photography and real estate photography. She was going out and she was shooting 5, 6 apartments a day, coming back, processing, retouching, doing all the images on her own, and then, rinse and repeat, going out the next day and doing the same thing over and over and over again. And she was not getting paid what she wanted to do. She was not being fulfilled creatively the way that she wanted to be fulfilled. She wanted to be able to slow things down and be able to really focus on a storytelling, architectural experience. She wanted to work with architects and hotels and interior designers. She wanted to elevate her game. So we decided to pair up. I was going to be the head of business development, and she was going to be the head creative. And I spent the next 8 months basically cold calling, but for Donna Dotan Photography. And Google Excel was my friend. I was trying to set up meetings. I was networking as best as I could. I'd say in the first 6 months, I got us 3 meetings. It was not going well. But in the next 6 months, I got about 12 meetings, and we closed about half of the clients. And it was just because I was able to follow up. Because I did not get the job on the first phone call. I did not get the job on the second phone call. I got them listening to me probably on the 3rd time around, and then I would get invited in on the 4th or 5th, or better yet, I was just top of mind, and they reached out to me, and they invited me in. And so when we were able to close on half of these people, things started changing. Very quickly, Donna was able to phase out real estate, which is really what she wanted to do, and we were able to focus on building on the architectural side of things. Again, we did not really know what we were doing. She was a photographer. I had graduated with a degree in English, and we were trying to build a business. So what we did was we would bring in consultants, and that is a really good piece of advice. It is okay not to know what you need to do, but you should bring in people who do to advise, and then you can make your own judgments. So we brought in people to help us figure out what our direction could be, what our price points could be, people who had been there, and that was very, very helpful at that time. So at a certain point, we had come to a crossroads. We were like, well, do we stay in the real estate game, or do we go into architecture? And we decided that we're going to phase out real estate completely, not do that anymore. And then 2 things happened. We got an opportunity to work with, do you know Frederick Eklund, the guy from $1 Million Listing? Does anybody watch that show, $1 Million Listing? It's a show on Bravo about real estate agents who sell $1 million listings. It's been on for about 8 or 9 years, and this guy, Frederick Eklund, is one of the stars of it, and he's also one of the stars in Douglas Elliman. He does billions of dollars worth of real estate every single year, and he's a big deal. So we got an appointment with him to shoot for him exclusively, and we decided that the meeting went well. He approved our rates, and we made an agreement that we were only going to shoot for him. We did that for about a year, and then we parted ways. And then around that time, we got invited into to meet with a new tech company that was getting into the real estate game. At the time, they were called Urban Compass, and they were more of a startup than they were a real estate company. So during our time shooting for Frederick Eklund, we pivoted a lot. You know, we were able to kind of do a lot of these things that we wanted to do. We wanted to slow things down. We were able to do that. We wanted to have more expressive imagery, more storytelling imagery. We were able to do that. We were able to bring in models into the photo shoots. And so we were starting to see like a really, really, really cool reaction from the types of imagery we were taking. Again, we didn't really want to be in real estate anymore. However, we got an opportunity to meet with the executives at this new company. We were able to go in and we pitched them. We said, this is what real estate photography is. This is what we want to do. And they said, wow, this is a really, really cool idea. And we think that this could really help us kind of blow up when it comes to imagery. So you're going to be approved for the rates that you want. The only thing is that you are going to have to go after each agent individually. So you're like, all right, well, they approved us. Let's just see what happens. Let's see if we can make this work. And so we started converting agent to agent to agent. We started using us. We started reaching out to them. We started trying to work through the people that we were already working with and see if they could actually refer us. And slowly but surely, we started taking off. And Donna, was getting a little bit too busy, and she just couldn't handle the workload. So we came up with an idea to see if she could replicate this process, but with me. So she actually taught me at first how to do the retouching, and then she taught me how to do the photography, and we started basically becoming a photography team together and going out and shooting and starting to conquer. And word of mouth took over. But at a certain point, Don and I, we had gotten married. We were starting a family. And she had proved through me that this is a process that could be taught. Photography, the retouching, something that was actually becoming popular, was something that we could replicate. So we decided that we were going to bring on outside people, and we were going to strike a deal with them, and they were going to be independent contractors, and they were going to work with us. And we started off with retouchers and teaching them the process there. But then we started bringing on photographers, slowly, surely. At a certain point, I didn't need to be a salesman anymore. You know, word of mouth had started taking over. And so we started transitioning our business to be able to kind of get into growth mode, to bring on more people to fulfill this demand, which was really, really exciting. And at a certain point, I stopped doing the photography, I stopped going out, and I started transitioning back into becoming more of the business lead and, you know, figuring out strategies for growth. And at 2017, at the beginning of it, we had been planning it in 2016, but that was when we decided that we were going to launch an actual agency to represent architectural photographers in the real estate industry. So as we grew, I still didn't know what I was doing a lot of the time. You know, to date, it had been just, again, throwing it on the wall, seeing if it sticks. If it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, you just kind of reevaluate and go from there. But we definitely needed help, so I started bringing in, you know, more consultants. I joined more networking groups, and I started kind of leaning into my community for help about issues that might pop up. You know, these growth hurdles about cash flow or you know, infrastructure versus growth, and how do you manage that, and how far do you push, and you know, how you maintain. You know, a big part of our success is developing processes or processes. So I designed a custom app through Airtable, which is this back end basically. And we're living in very, very exciting times when you can actually kind of go out there. You can find software solutions that can be customized for whatever your business is. Be able to kind of take control of that, to be able to grow off it, and be able to automate as much as you can of your business. And so that's what I set out to do, is to be able to automate a lot of what was going on with the business so that we could continue to grow. So I brought in, you know, consultants to basically build this out. And I was able to utilize things because we needed to communicate with each other. You know, right now we have 20 team members. So how do we all talk to each other? Well, we do it through Slack. You know, we have Trello. I use a program called Zapier to be able to basically connect, to automate things. Zapier is a great tool to be able to automate anything. So if you want to schedule an appointment, you can do it through Zapier, through Airtable, where you plug in the date, sends out an email to the client and to the photographer, letting them know where they should go. It sends a Google Calendar invite. A lot of exciting things that can be done through something like Airtable, through Zapier. I needed to learn how to communicate better as a leader because we had a lot of different team members. So what I did is something we call it huddling up. So basically, you should always keep in touch. You know, if you develop a business and you have a team, you need to be communicating. You always need to be talking. And if you are working together for long periods of time, you need to do it repetitively. So what we do is we do weekly huddles. So we have a weekly huddle for our retouchers, we have a weekly huddle for our photographers, and I have a bi-weekly huddle for the people that are in-house, that are like my operations manager and anyone else who's in the office. And it's here that we talk about things. We just have a very open 15-minute meeting where we talk about what's working, what's not working, success stories for that week, you know, things that we have questions about, and it's a great way to communicate. So I highly recommend that everyone huddle up, even if it's just you. You know, set aside, put together an agenda for yourself to get through for that meeting. Figure out what your goals are for that week, and do that repetitively. Make a process and go with it. So here's I'm going to have about 8 to 10 tips for success that have benefited me since I started. And honestly, again, if I had known about these things 10 years ago, I think I would have avoided a lot of issues that I came up across. So one of the first things that we had to figure out that we had no idea about until we brought in a consultant to tell us was we had to figure out what our cost of doing business was. So when we were first getting started, we didn't know how to price things. You know, it was a big issue. How do I make money? How do I know what to charge? I don't know what anyone else is charging. It's not like a union thing. So how do I know who I'm competing against when I'm making a bid? How much is the other person doing? You don't know. You have to put the bid out there. So how do you come up with that price? Well, the best way to start is to figure out what your cost of doing business is. And what does that mean? That means that you need to figure out what are your expenses for doing photography? What are your hard expenses for doing that type of work? How much time are you spending on each project? You know? And then you need to ask yourself, what are your expenses to live? You know, how much is your rent, right? How much are you spending on transportation in a year, in a month, whatever? Figure it out. Extrapolate. And then you need to ask yourself the most important question. How much do you want to make that year? Is it $50,000? Is it $100,000? Once you have that number, now you need to figure out how many days you can expect to be shooting. Is it 30? Is it 40? 50? 100 days of shooting? Right? So you have all of this information, right? So now you take the expenses, how much you need to live, how much you want to make, add those together, and divide it by the number of days that you're going to be shooting, right? And now you have some sense of a day rate. It's not perfect, okay? It's not perfect at all. It's a starting point. But if you come up with a number, and it's like your day rate is like $100,000 for the day or something like that, you got to reevaluate. And if it's $50 for the day, you also got to reevaluate. So again, it's not an end-all be-all, but it's an amazing place to start. Figure out your cost of doing business. Self-assign creatively. Always be self-assigning. So I get lost in the business aspect of things. I'm always thinking about the numbers. I'm always thinking about how do I grow? How do I do this? Sometimes I got to step back and I got to think creatively, you know? Especially Donna does that all the time. She's always looking for ways to self-assign. It's a lot easier because she's a head creative, right? But it's very, very important that you're always dressing for the job you want, not the job you have. Start shooting. That's a great way to start meeting people, too. It's a great way to start networking because you're going to be pulling people in. And also, it's a great way to get noticed. You have all of these amazing platforms. Social media is your friend. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that. But you get noticed on social media. People reach out to us through social media all the time because of the stuff that we're putting out there, right? And at the beginning, if I'd done more active work in social media, I feel like we would have grown a lot more quickly. So this is definitely something that I want to impart to you. Be specific. All right, so what do I mean by that? You know, how many people here shoot more than one category? Meaning like portraits, events. I would highly suggest that if you're shooting more than one category, that you try to narrow it down. Narrow it down to what you are best at. Especially when you're promoting yourself as a professional photographer. If you're advertising more than one category, it becomes harder to charge a highly specialized rate. So I was writing this, you know, this is the Bruce Lee, it's a famous line, I fear not the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And as I was writing that, I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, I'm going to give my little spin on that. I would rather charge $10,000 for the thing I'm best at than $1,000 for 10 things I'm good at. And I think that's something that you guys should definitely take away from this. Sales. So sales is obviously really, really important, right? You need to like sell to live. You need to promote your work, right? The first phase of your career, it really needs to have a heavy input into the outreach portion. So you need to really be making a lot of connections. So what we were doing before, I was doing a lot of cold calling. There's a thing called 7 points of contact, which basically means that let's say you've made your ideal list of clients. So you know, for us, we had made a list of 100 companies, architects, hotels, whatever it was that we wanted to get jobs with. We had 100 of them, right? So once we had that list, we had to figure out ways that we could reach them. So yes, we could call them over and over again. We can email them over and over again, but eventually it would just become white noise. But if you hit them 7 different ways through 7 different methods, by the time that you got to the 7th way, they were going to know who you were. Now, that was the theory. So we tried doing portfolio pieces, and we would try doing phone calls, try to set up meetings, but hit them 7 different times, 7 different ways. And that was really, really beneficial. That helped a lot. Again, you're never going to get them on the first try. If you do, holy cow, that's amazing. Hold on to them. But by the 5th time, I mean, you're giving yourself the best opportunity to gain a client. Also, yeah, please join networking groups, go to parties, meet people, be out there. Join ASMP. You can start a brain trust group on ASMP. They will match you up and start just connecting with your fellow peers. But be out there. Absolutely be out there. So one of the things that really helped me succeed eventually, because I did commercial real estate, I was not doing very well. But once I got into the photography aspect, which was something that I was really passionate about, I started applying all the things that I had learned. I just needed to be persistent. I needed to follow up. And I recently saw a movie called The Founder with Michael Keaton. It's about Ray Kroc, who is the quote-unquote founder of McDonald's. And there's a really, really great speech about persistence. It's a funny movie because it's a great character study about a guy, Ray Kroc, who basically stole an idea and very persistently made his way to being very, very successful in turning McDonald's into what it was. So there's this really big dichotomy because on one side of things, he's an absolutely brilliant salesman, and he was the reason why McDonald's was as successful as it was. But on the other side of things, I mean, you know, he was pretty cutthroat in how he got there, including stealing a lot of things. But I found myself taking a lot of business principles away from this, which actually were really, really amazing. And the most important one was being persistent. Being persistent is absolutely what leads to so many people to success. It's when they hear the no and they say, I don't care, I'm going to keep going. Because that's what's going to break through. That's what's going to help you break through. Sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but if you are persistent, you can get there. You can create a very successful business for yourself. Yeah, and going along with that, you know, being persistent means staying organized. It means logging things in. It means creating a process But most importantly, it means following that process and trying not to deviate from it too much. But when you do it very deliberately. Always be learning. I talked about this, but bring in consultants when you don't know something. It is okay not to know. Use your fellow photographers for input, for advice. So yes, set up a brain trust if you can. You got a bunch of photographers here. Just start communicating, talking, sharing your experiences. Huddle up with each other. You're going to get more out of sharing than you will out of being secretive. Pivoting. I pivoted a lot in my career. And pivoting to me is really the art of identifying new opportunities and being able to apply my specialty to it. So I would say we've already pivoted 5 or 6 times. You know, I was in commercial real estate, obviously, and I pivoted to being the head of business development for a photography company. We pivoted into being an agency. We pivoted away from real estate into architectural photography, and then we pivoted back into real estate because we were able to identify these opportunities and be able to go with them and not be too afraid to take a risk and maybe sacrifice one thing in order to be gaining a bigger share of something else. So pivoting. Think about pivoting. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about is having internal core principles. These are really, really important. This is your why. So whether it's you, whether you have a company of 1,000 people or a company of 5, doesn't matter. You need to know what your why is. You need to know why you do what you do. You do that with internal principles that guide your company's decision making. So I have 5 principles that we follow, and I make sure every team member I have follows. And if they don't follow it, they're probably not on my team. So here's my principles. The more you give, the more you get. You know, I talk about it here, how sharing is important. Well, you know what? I make sure that every team member is sharing. I have a new photographer that's training with one of our older photographers right now. He's on site with him, and he's learning. And we encourage that through Slack. Whenever there's any questions, we encourage people to ask. We want to have an open environment for that. 2, every job like it's going into Architectural Digest. So no matter how big the project is or how small the project is, just means that our process is the same. Integrity of the process. Sometimes clients, they want you to do things in a way that you don't feel comfortable with. We value the integrity of what our process is, and we make sure that that is most important. If you start it, you finish it. And it's very simple. If you're taking something on, if you're not going to finish it, you don't belong here. Lead, don't follow. A lot of our team members, when they're getting started, this is really, really good advice for them because they get in there and they let the client take the lead. So it's really, really important. They're bringing us in there because we are the absolute foremost professionals in the industry. So we make sure that throughout the whole thing that we are the ones that are in control of the shoot, of the project. And so we make sure that these things are something that lead all of our decisions, that these are the things that the people who are part of our team, they're aware of from the beginning. They understand what the culture is. That's very important. They're coming into your culture, you know. Beyond that, that's what I have for you. I hope you guys learn one thing and are able to take away one thing from this presentation. And if you have any questions about anything that I spoke about, please feel free. Oh, also, just going to leave my information. If anyone wants to email or call or whatever, I'm open. So feel free. Yes.
So you talk about the growing aspects of your business and you're training new photographers and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about what the photographers you work with, what's that demographic look like? Are they coming to you right out of school? Have they been working for a while?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It's a great question. Generally speaking, we want our photographers to have at least 3 years of experience in the field, in shooting architecture, having architectural clients, or working in real estate. You know, every once in a while, we kind of have our own little passion project. So we bring in someone that we like who shows persistence, and we might train them from the ground up, and they'll be going through a much slower process than some of our other photographers will go through when it comes to kind of ramping them up and getting them out into the field. And the training process itself, it can take anywhere from, a month, maybe even sooner, depending on the on how experienced the photographer coming into the fold is, all the way up to 4 or 5 months if we're doing some sort of passion project or kind of bringing someone in who's relatively green.
So just to follow that up a little bit, you said before that everybody in your company, they're independent contractors. So how often, once they're trained, what does that look like for them? How often are they shooting with you versus doing work, for other clients that they may have?
So especially for photographers, we don't want them to only be working with us. We want them to be out there developing their own business. So we have a system where they're showing us their calendar, or at least they're showing us when they're open, and we try to fill that up. But if they block off a Friday or a Tuesday, we're not going to schedule them. So it's very variable in terms of like how much they're going to be working with us, because if they open themselves up to more work, they're going to be getting more work. But honestly, with a lot of these people, this is how they keep their tool set sharpened. Is this type of work, and then when they're getting their bigger architectural clientele, they're ready to rock. So it's really beneficial for them to just be out there shooting, being creative. And so just to reiterate the answer, it's kind of dependent on them.
Cool. I have more questions, but does anybody else have questions before I keep going? Okay, I'll throw another one out there. So you talk about the 5 ideas, principles that you had for the business. I mean, I think that's a great thing for any either independent photographer or any type of business to have those types of goals in mind on how they're going to deliver all the time and how they're, basically going to move through the world is kind of the way I took that last slide. How did you sort of get there? Because that's something that I think takes some time to come up with.
Well, it's actually it's quite deliberate. At a certain point, I talked about how I joined these groups and I've had mentors, and there's a few people who kind of imparted this idea to me, and so I deliberately went home one day and I thought about it. I said to myself, we've been operating one way, and these are the things that we believe in, but it had never been written out before, and so I very deliberately made this list. And it took a little bit of company soul searching to figure out exactly how to articulate what it was that we were, and I'll tell you, it was incredible. It was like night and day from the time that we started kind of implementing these core principles to our team to see how they reacted to it, because in a sense they suddenly had guidelines that they themselves could follow and expectations that they themselves had, and so they were able to kind of I don't want to say fall in line, but I would say they were able to kind of, they were able to grow creatively because they had a structure that they could work through these types of principles.
I think that's something all you guys should start thinking about. Also, maybe you're not quite at the point where you're going to create a list like that, but definitely something to think through. Just sort of like almost not just business values, but humanistic values too. I mean, I love how the first one is you give more than
the more you give, the
more
more you get.
The more you get. Thank you. Right? I mean, what a great first approach and something to think about in terms of business and on top of personal life and personal growth. So I thought that was really cool. Another question for you, and you guys have all started working on this with Adriana in the applied class, but the cost of doing business, right? I think maybe Brian, if you had some advice on how to figure that out. So especially at the beginning, like these guys are not actively shooting yet, how do you even project what that could look like?
What a cost of doing business could look like? I think it starts from actually just self-assigning, in creating a project for yourself. And you're going to quickly find out, what your limitations are there financially. I mean, if you can understand what your expenses are, I mean, you can obviously what you need to live, what you want to make, hopefully, and then you just need to figure out how much does it cost to make a photo shoot. I mean, you could quickly come to an idea of what your day rate could be. But here's the thing, is like, you would never really know what's the right answer. You know, you're going to get so many job opportunities. You're going to throw an estimate out there, and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what you're bidding against. So a lot of it actually is going to be kind of, you know, you're going to experience it. You're going to experience someone saying no, and you're going to be like, all right, well, maybe I was too high, or maybe I was too low. You know, sometimes clients, when you throw in a bid and you underbid, you know, sometimes they want someone who's got a higher bid because it represents a little bit more professionalism, quote unquote, right? So it's kind of like a wacky world. It's a wild, wild west. But you know, through trying to figure out at least your cost of doing business, you can come up with some sort of baseline, some sort of foundation that you can grow off of. Because again, you're gonna apply this. You're gonna come up with what you think is fair, and you're gonna learn from that experience, from the experience of bidding, what works and what doesn't work.
I can keep going.
Yeah, please.
All right. So just to follow up on that, you know, when a bid gets turned down, and you were talking before about the persistence, and you know, even at the beginning you were talking about your follow-up, right? How comfortable are you, and how often, if you're following up with a client or a potential client that did not get the job, to say, you know, I'd love to know how come. What could I have done different? And how often do you get substantial answers that you can actually grow with next time?
Rarely ever. Every so often you do. You know, the people you get those answers from are the people that you've cultivated relationships with before you get the bid opportunity. You know, so if you get in with someone and, you know, you're talking to them and you kind of break them down personally, and you kind of have a friendly relationship. Well, when you get that opportunity and it doesn't work out because they present it to their boss and the boss says no, you know, you're going to find out from that person what went wrong, you know, what the feedback was. If it was too expensive, if they went with someone else, if someone had a different relationship with another photographer and they just wanted to like get a comparison of quotes type of thing. But if you don't know this person, if it's the first time you're getting an opportunity, and they ask you for a bid, you know, like one of the things I always do too is I say, do you have a budget in mind? They're never going to say what the budget is, and if they do, then it's like, wow, I got lucky there. You always ask. You don't necessarily get back what you want. But if you don't get that bid, and, you know, I ask for feedback, you know, even if they say something, it's somewhat generic. But I still always ask because, you know, even something generic is still information. If you don't put anything out there, you're never going to get anything back.
Talk a lot about sort of word of mouth, and that's how a lot of your clientele has grown. I would imagine there's a lot of outreach that you do as well to find new clients. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
I used to do a lot more. At the beginning, it was constantly trying to go out there to meet people. I mean, I'm still in various networking groups. I'm in a BNI chapter, amongst other organizations, and I try to go to as many events as possible just to have face-to-face. I used to cold call a lot and try and set up meetings with people and just get the information out there. And now what I try to do, I've shifted a little bit. You know, I try to do things like this more. Try to kind of get in front of a group, and I'm able to kind of talk about our process to people, to explain to them, you know, what our key differentiators are. So a lot of what I do now, whereas before I was just trying to reach out to anyone and everyone, now I'm much more targeted. So I'm going after office managers, and I'm trying to kind of like create a meeting where I can then facilitate some sort of seminar, let's say, as well as still networking. Face-to-face is always the best, so I try to be out there as much as I can. And also I do client-facing on projects. Especially now that the weather is nicer, we're trying to get out there and once a week try to tail a photographer and hang out with the client and just kind of like get to reintroduce myself to them. And that's great because I get to meet with the client, but also I get to kind of see what the photographer is doing. I get to see how they work, to see you know, if there's any critiques I can make, any things that I can say, or just kind of marvel on how awesome they're doing. you know, but it's a great way to kind of connect with them as well.
All right, other questions?
You said that you guys don't use strobes for your photography, right?
Sorry, say that again?
You don't use lighting. You don't use
No.
strobes, right?
No.
And I've been working for a while for Ralph Lauren, and we do a lot of architectural photography.
Mhm.
But we do mix available light with strobes, and we use gels to compensate for the temperature of the light.
Mhm.
Why you don't like to use strobes? And I can also use like this analogy with the movies, with film. When you see a movie, like regardless of if they are using natural light or strobes, they are still mixing the lighting that is available like on that scene. Even if it's like a lamp, if it's like the house lights,
Mhm.
those things they give like more environment to these spaces, especially when you're talking about like real estate and architectural photography. Why you don't let like your customers get also this feeling of these warm lights, these lights that they are already there and they could be like part of what you're buying eventually
It's a
in
great
the
question.
future.
When people come to us, they know what they're getting. They know based on what our process is. So it is a deliberate decision to shoot like this. So again, it's not like someone's coming to us and they're saying, you know, we have this idea and we want you to execute it and we want it to look like that and look like this. Those are very rare cases when we're doing, you know, very high budget type projects where we're incorporating models, and I don't know if there was models incorporated there. But yes, that's an entirely different situation. So when we do have these big budget projects and we're doing mood boards and we're doing pre-production meetings and we have a very specific stylistic look that we're talking about, we will entertain those conversations, and it's a little bit of a different situation. I'm talking about why people come to us for real estate photography, because they know what they're getting back. You know, we're not entertaining their needs. They're coming to us for our look, right? So it's kind of already sold itself. And that's another idea where I talk about the integrity of the process. This is our process, kind of our patented look. So people that come to us, it's because they want to replicate that look, right? Because it's already gotten a return on their investment. I mean, we always show testimonial after testimonial, showing about how our process helps get more people in the door for you. So kind of let us do what we do in the way that we do it, and we'll be able to help you sell this listing. That's the philosophy behind it. And it's more about their kind of stepping into our domain and trying to buy our look. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Hi. I do a lot of fashion photography, and I want to pursue my career in fashion photography. It's known that few genres of photography is like they don't fetch you business during the first few months or years. It's like you have to do something out of what you really want to do to make a living, like a photographer. So would you be suggesting a person to, like, I was thinking of doing weddings or something that I could monetize to make a living, or wherein I can save some money that I could invest on fashion photography, or would you just want a person to, keep pushing just on these lines and see where it
You
goes?
can do that. If I was going to make a suggestion to you, and you're trying to like survive, I would say have two different websites. Have a wedding website and a fashion website. Do not commingle them, so that when you want to push your specialty, when they're looking at the work you do, they're going to see someone who only does weddings. Like they eat, breathe, sleep wedding photography. Or, wow, this guy only does fashion photography. He must be the best at what he does, because look, he doesn't do anything else. He only does this. I know I can trust him because he's not doing weddings and real estate photography and interiors and doing all of these different things. He's focused on one thing. So I would say, yeah, I'm not saying don't do that other stuff. I'm just saying that when you're thinking about how you're advertising your own work, You want to be as specific as possible. You don't want to give people the impression that you do other things because they're hiring you for wedding photography. They're hiring you for fashion photography. They're not hiring you to do a fashion shoot on Tuesday and then their wedding on Saturday, you know? Yeah.
Okay, so the $1 million question, I think, right, is for the photographers you bring on, can you give us a range of what day rates kind of look like for them, or an annual amount that people are working for you?
Annual amount. Yeah,
And,
I mean,
and a day rate probably is easier, and I think a little more.
our shoots start at $500. And then it's also a little bit variable depending on how many images the client selects. And then we have a breakdown within that, and a lot of it is kind of dependent upon the experience of the photographer. But they go through phases. They start off as a trainee if they need to, and then they go to being a junior, and then they go to being a senior level photographer. Once they're a senior level photographer, we open them up to high end work, where we introduce them into our architectural clients, our hotel clients, our interior design clients, and those are every single phase they're getting paid a little bit different of a structure. We had a photographer last year who earned $100,000 with us. And they're going to blow that away, I think, this year. And they have their own clients, obviously. They're doing their own work. But the more they work with us, the more of a reputation they get within our company, and the more people request them. That's another thing, too, is the longer you're working within our organization, the more people you're meeting, the more agents you're meeting, the more clients you're meeting. And so when the client likes a photographer, they don't want to go away from that photographer. They're always going to request that photographer. So you get a lot of repeat business like that.
Other questions? Okay. All right.
When you have these other photographers, and you said that you would like for them to work with other people, I guess, right, their own clients, do you have like a set of rules or standards that they can't use your techniques with their own personal clients?
No, not at all. The only thing is they can't work with our clients, on their own. So the people that we have like some sort of agreement where, they're not going to be stealing our clients from us, type of thing. But part of the reason that they work with us is that they're able to grow as photographers. They're able to kind of grow themselves as their own business. I just don't believe in the idea that they can't use the work that they do for us, let's say for their own portfolio or anything. That's another thing is a lot of these agencies when they bring on photographers, they make sure that they own the copyright of the photographers, which is just ridiculous. They make like these work for hire agreements with their photographers, and we are so against that. So we make sure that the photographer, they maintain the copyright of anything they do with us. They're the ones who are making these compositions, so it's their work. And within that, so, I'm getting a little lost. Did I answer your question at all? Sorry.
What is your process once the client is, when the assignment is confirmed? First, your photographer go to the site and visit the site and decide the shots, or how it is, or they went to the site, go to the site for the final day shoot and just have the photographs.
So what happens is a photographer, they go to the shoot, right? Let's say it's a 2-bedroom, right? They might come out of it with 12 angles that they've taken, right? It doesn't mean that the client is buying these angles or is licensing these angles, excuse me. But we're going to take as many relevant shots that we feel might help the agent sell the apartment. That say storytelling to us. We feel are relevant while on site. Photographer is going to come home. We have a proofing system, right? So we have a software, online software, where the photographer chooses the medium exposure because they bracket from really, really bright to really, really dark. So they choose the medium one so that the client can see what the shot looks like. It's unretouched. It's raw. Doesn't look great. And they upload these shots, these angles, all these angles. Let's say there was 12 angles. They upload all these angles into the proofing system. It gets sent to the client. And then the client has a decision to make. Our base package comes with 5 photos. You know, each additional photo costs money to them. If they want all these photos, then they have to choose all of these photos. Then they share them with us. Once they share these selections, those are the final selections. They go right into our retouching queue. Our retouchers see the selections. The RAWs have already been uploaded into our server from the photographer, and they get right to work. And then 2 days later, hopefully 2 business days later, we deliver the finals to the client.
Do you add props if you think, I mean, I saw one
Yeah.
image like you add some table or something, you remove the main center table and you add some other props. So
Yeah, so we'll go through the house, whatever they have. We're not bringing anything externally into the apartment, but we'll run around and we'll say, okay, this coffee table needs a book, or 2 books, or a stack of books. What does the owner have available? This needs a bouquet of flowers. We need some peonies right here. What does the owner have? Sometimes we'll make the agent go out and get some flowers and bring it back, and then we'll work within whatever vases the owner has. But generally, we're just kind of trying to make it work with whatever is available. And if it was a bigger shoot, again, you know, like we'll work with interior designers or architects, and they have a whole day of prep, of pre-production, where they're bringing in all of these things, all of these stylings. Other times, you know, they come to us and they say, do you have a stylist that you work with that can come in and help us kind of, you know, work some magic on this space before you come and shoot it? So we can kind of do that. But very generally speaking, we're working with whatever they have in there.
When you're giving a package to a client, does that include, does it say like, we're going to be giving you these many number of final images in that is included in the package, or is it just that it's going to be like, we're going to be shooting this space and this is what we're going to be charging you?
They know what our base package includes, and then we express that we give them a rundown of our process. We let them know that they're going to be seeing a lot of angles, and the final invoice is going to be dependent upon how many they choose. But they are aware of the pricing beforehand, and they are aware of what the base package is. If you don't, and it's got to be in writing. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. You know, if you're telling someone over the phone how much something is going to cost, you are going to have problems. You better put that into email. You better get a responsive confirmation from them too. Yeah. So.
The angles that you don't sell, can the agency or the photographer sell these extra photos to stock photography sites like Getty Images?
You know, when it comes to spaces, that is a very difficult proposition. You need like the owners to sign off on some sort of agreement that you can license these images. And when you're talking about real estate, you know, these things come in volume, these types of jobs. You're just not going to be getting that, and it's more of a hassle to try to obtain that from an owner. And also, you'd be putting your agent in a very difficult position trying to get some sort of agreement from the owner saying that you could license to stock photos of their personal home and some of their personal items. So we don't do that. What we do is we have agreements with the agencies expressing what the license of these photos are. For example, so, you know, with the company, we make sure that they know that the license exists for the life of the listing. And then after, we give them an exclusive license for the life of the listing. And then after, it's a non-exclusive license, and we're able to kind of then, what we would do is we might license a project to an architect who took part in designing the apartment, or a designer, or a stager, you know. And so once that apartment has sold, or the exclusive has run out, it kind of then opens us up for some second life opportunities there. But we would never be able to really put that stuff on a stock site and sell that.
In one of our classes, Applied Photo, we're getting to learn that licensing is something that will help you stay in business and make money. So let's say you have a client and his licensing the images for like 6 months, and you get to see the work. Like, how would you know that they are not using the images post 6 months for any print or?
Yeah, it's a good question. You don't. There's like ways that you can do Google image searches. There's a company called Pixie, I think, where you can upload all of your images and then it tries to track for you where they're being used. But I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do to be able to track. I mean, for us, again, like you saw, we're doing 750 projects to date this year. We did 1,000 projects last year, and you can't monitor the whole web. What you do is you tell these people how they can use it. If they're using it outside of that, if they're using it outside of that license, then they're going to be in trouble. And there's got to be a level of trust there. Sometimes you come across these things where people are using, where a designer or an architect is using images that you did of a real estate shoot and they don't have permission. Then you can approach them. You can say, look, I'm very flattered that you like these photos, but you're either going to have to pay us or take it down. Very simply, But then, there's a lot of things that you got to consider there, You got to consider the relationship, too, the relationship you have with your client. But the most important thing you need to do is communicate to these people before you get into bed with them professionally about how they can use your images. Don't ever sell your images. Don't sell the copyright. License the images. It is very, very different. If you ever see something in a contract that says work for hire, run away, because you are giving up the copyright. And as a photographer, your copyright is your gold. Do not give up your copyright. And if you do, you better be charging a substantial amount for that, because you will never be able to use them again. Anything else? All right.
It's a good note to end on, I think.
Yeah.
So hopefully what you guys took away from this is persistence, follow through, and planning, right? I mean, that's clearly comes through everything that Brian's talking about up here. And I think can really be used not only for the rest of your time here at school, because you need all that stuff as well, but moving forward into the business world, whatever aspect of photography you guys wind up in, it's all important. All right, and let's just hear it for Brian. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.